inside a apprenticeship, you're supposed to get a certain amount of hours working on transmission hours. Now, the whole point of an apprenticeship is learning on the job, learning in the classroom, earning while learning. So the best way to do it, that's why I always try to tell people getting into a union apprenticeship, because union apprenticeships are really good about being able to educate you and get you the best experience that you need to become a master or journeyman of that trade. So inside of the lineman apprenticeship, you need to get X amount of hours working on transmission lines, on a transmission job, doing transmission work. Welcome back to episode 13 of CTQ. CTQ is a segment I do on this channel called Cruise the Questions. Now, Cruise the Questions is where I take your guys' questions and I answer them here for you guys to learn and for anyone else who might have similar questions. So this is a way that I can get questions that you guys have about getting started in a skilled trade, whether that be lineman trade, electrician, iron worker, welding, whatever trade you're interested in. I'm here to help answer your questions. And if I don't have the answers, I'll get the answers from somebody I do know that has the answers, because I have a pretty good network of people that I know that are in a variety of different trades. So whatever your questions are, do not hesitate to ask them. You can submit them a couple different ways. You can go ahead and just DM them on any one of the social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, at Blue Collar EDU, or in the YouTube comments down below. Or the best way is to email me your questions at austin@bluecollaredu.com. I take your guys' questions, I put them in my portfolio of questions, and then each week I try to do at least one of these episodes where I can take your guys' questions and I answer them here to better help educate you guys. So with that being said, let's hop into question number one. Question number one comes from actually a previous apprentice of mine. And this isn't so much a question, but it is a very relatable topic to those of you who are getting into an apprenticeship or just starting or are in an apprenticeship right now. He says, "Hey brother, I have a video suggestion. You tell me what you think. I was thinking, what if you'd make a video about how to document hot hours? Several guys have asked me about how to do it. You made a good point when I asked you if I could put down 6 hours of hot time because I energized 6 cans. And you told me yes, but it could also hurt me if I pencil whip hot hours and later not being able to show for it." Like I said, this isn't so much a question, but if I were to take a question out of what he's asking me to do is, what is the proper way to document your hours inside of an apprenticeship? This is a pretty important topic to talk about for those of you who are getting into an apprenticeship, or especially like a union apprenticeship or even non-union apprenticeships. If you're able to get, your start working, documenting the hours you get is very important. So let's dive into this a little bit and I'll better help educate you guys what this exactly means and how important documenting your hours is only going to help you in the future. So let's hop into this. First, let me get some energy going and let's dive into this topic. So let's break down what he means about hours. Inside of an apprenticeship, I'm going to talk about the lineman apprenticeship specifically. Now, this is very much the same across the board when it comes to many different apprenticeships. What I mean by this is, inside of a union apprenticeship, you will have to get a certain amount of hours in different categories for that said apprenticeship. Now, for the lineman apprenticeship, you're going to need to get hours doing transmission work. Now, transmission work is a big part of the lineman energy, electricity trade, whatever you want to call it. All the big power lines you see running throughout the whole entire country is up on the big steel lattice towers or on big monopoles. These are the wires that you see all over the place. Like you'll be in the middle of nowhere and all of a sudden you'll see like a power line just running for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. These are big transmission lines that, they're 69,000 volts, which is usually sub-transmission, all the way up to 750,000, 500,000 volt lines that carry big chunks of electricity or voltage throughout a state, throughout the countryside. Those are transmission lines. Now, as an apprentice lineman inside a apprenticeship, you're supposed to get a certain amount of hours working on transmission hours. Now, the whole point of an apprenticeship is learning on the job, learning in the classroom, earning while learning. So the best way to do it, that's why I always try to tell people getting into a union apprenticeship, because union apprenticeships are really good about being able to educate you and get you the best experience that you need to become a master or journeyman of that trade. So inside of the lineman apprenticeship, you need to get X amount of hours working on transmission lines, on a transmission job, doing transmission work. In Northwest, I believe it was like 1,600 hours I needed to get in working on a transmission line, working on a transmission crew, we're doing transmission work. Because that's one sector of work that is done inside the lineman trade. Now, you also need to get X amount of hours doing distribution work. Now, distribution work is like the smaller power lines or telephone poles, people call them, going throughout your town, throughout your city. They're about 40, 50, 60 feet in the air. Those are your distribution lines. Or even the small transformer, the boxes you see on the ground. Those are all distribution power lines. Now, you're going to need to get a lot of hours working on distribution systems, because distribution systems are probably the most important, the most prevalent amount of work done in the power line industry. There's so much more distribution lines and distribution work to be done versus transmission. So transmission is step down to distribution. Distribution is what feeds throughout an entire city or throughout a town, which steps down to even smaller voltage through a transformer to your house. So from the average voltage for a distribution line is 12,470 volts phase to phase and 7,200 volts phase to ground. So a transformer steps that down to a 120/240, which goes to your house. You can search what a transformer does. I have a video on the channel. You can learn more about transformers. So you'll have to get X amount of hours doing distribution work. Now, distribution is divided into many different categories as well. So you'll have cold distribution hours, which is basically you a groundman, or if you're doing a brand new distribution line or a brand new subdivision build where you're installing overhead or underground power lines, brand new work, you're a groundman, you are a cold apprentice. So which means if you're a cold apprentice, you're not able to do hot work or work on energized lines yet. So that's usually step 1 through 4 or 1 through 5, depending on jurisdiction, whatever apprenticeship you're in throughout the country. So you need to get X amount of hours inside that apprenticeship for distribution. You'll have cold hours, you'll have underground, you'll have overhead hours. Overhead and underground are your two biggest divisions when it comes to distribution work. And then inside of your distribution work, we get into hot hours. And this is what my apprentice was asking or telling me about, is pencil whipping hot hours. Now, before we dive into kind of what hot hours are, I also want to mention that inside the apprenticeship between transmission, distribution, you're supposed to get substation hours. Substations are basically big transformers, big pieces of equipment in the electrical infrastructure, which steps down or steps up transmission voltages down to distribution voltages. And that's what substations are usually for. So you're supposed to get like 200, 300 hours inside of a substation, doing substation work. A handful of categories where you're supposed to get experience, you're supposed to get hours. You submit these hours every month to the apprenticeship, to the apprenticeship committee, so they can keep track of your hours. This is where he's talking about pencil whipping hours. Guys, apprentices, I know I'm faulty of doing the same thing in my apprenticeship, but hot hours, it can be hard to get hot hours. If you're not on a job or you're not working in an area where they're doing a lot of hot work, let's say you're at a yard or you're on a job where you guys are doing underground in a subdivision where you're supposed to pull in some X thousands of feet of underground wire, you're placing these underground pad mount transformers, and you're doing all this. This is all brand new work and there's no hot time. The issue is if you're a hot apprentice, so you're 4th or 5th step above, you're a hot apprentice, so you are legally able to do hot work. So that means working on energized distribution lines with you as an apprentice and a journeyman under direct journeyman supervision. So you're supposed to get X amount of hot hours, and everywhere is different, but in the Northwest, I needed to get 1,000 hot hours. So if I'm on a job where we're not doing any hot time, we're not working on energized power lines, we're doing a brand new build where there's no hot work, all I'm doing is I'm marking down each day what hours I'm getting on a piece of paper, or now it's online where you're able to record all your hours and you submit it to the apprenticeship at the end of the month. You are not getting the appropriate hot hours because so you're kind of holding yourself back a little bit. And it's not your fault. You're supposed to, the apprenticeship is supposed to send you to areas where there's hot work, but sometimes there's not a whole lot of hot work available. A lot of the work going on might be brand new work, or whatever the case may be, there's not a lot of hot work, or wherever there is hot work, they already have hot apprentices working there. So being able to try to transform and place apprentices where they can get hot work and hot time, because for a lot of guys, they're waiting on getting hot time to complete their apprenticeship. And this is where it can become trouble. So if you're a hot apprentice, a fourth step, a fifth step apprentice, and you're looking to get these hot hours, and you're on a job, like I was saying, in a subdivision where the real only hot time you get is when you're going to energize all the underground cable you put in. You're literally taking an elbow and you're plugging it into a hot transformer, or you're terminating an elbow or terminating some secondaries inside of an energized pad mount transformer. Now, technically, you're working in a energized source where there's energized potential, so that is hot time. Realistically though, if you're just plugging in an elbow, that takes like not even 5 minutes. Or if you're terminating an elbow, doing some work in an energized transformer, it's usually an hour, maybe 2, depending. So, but what guys can get complacent with is they start marking that down as hot time. So every day you might be doing 3, 4, whatever transformers. So you're marking down 3 or 4 hours. And realistically, how effective is that for you as an apprentice? It's not very effective, because you're really only kind of cheating yourself. You're kind of lying to yourself. Now, you can mark these hours down as getting, let's say, 4 hot hours a day, and you need 500 or you need 1,000 hours of hot hours to complete the apprenticeship, because that's what the apprenticeship has you doing. Is before you can top out, become a journeyman, you got to get the appropriate amount of hours in each category, in each sector for the apprenticeship. So sometimes it sucks because you can't get these hours that you're needing to. You might be already in the apprenticeship 3 or so many years, and you're waiting on these hot hours. You're waiting on these certain amount of hours. So you start pencil whipping hours in. And most apprentices are probably faulty or probably guilty of doing this. I know I was to a point, because you start getting to the end of the apprenticeship, you're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, you're getting so close, you're like, crap, I only need 500 more hot hours. I have all my other hours I need to complete the apprenticeship. I'm just waiting on getting these 500 hours to complete the apprenticeship. And trust me, the thing you want to do is become a journeyman. This is the last part. This is the last stretch. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel. The touchdown is right there. You're just like, you're so close. So you might be pencil whipping some hot hours in. That may or may not have you complete the apprenticeship faster. The way I look at it is, you're only kind of cheating yourself in a way to where at the end of the road, when you get to the light at the end of the tunnel, you take your journeyman test, you become a journeyman lineman, and then you kind of realize you can do what you want now. The world's your oyster, and you can go work these different jobs or go work with a different contractor, go do this kind of work. This is why I say the real learning starts when you become a journeyman, because now you don't have a journeyman looking after you, looking over you, telling you what to do or how to do things. You are now the journeyman in that place. So if you're cheating yourself and pencil whipping hot hours in to complete your apprenticeship faster, you're kind of hurting yourself, because you're not necessarily getting that experience, that hands-on learning on the job, getting the appropriate hot hours, doing actually work on energized lines. You know what I mean? It's completely different when you're able just to pencil whip hours in versus actually earning those hours at the end of the road when you become a journeyman. And now all of a sudden you're on a job and you're actually doing real hot work versus, remember I was saying, you're pencil whipping hours in when you were doing a subdivision, you're pencil whipping 5 hours in because you energized 5 transformers, which realistically took you maybe an hour to do those 5 transformers, but you mark down 5 hours. You do what you want to do. Just know that the more pencil whipping you do, you're kind of really hurting yourself. So just be conscious of pencil whipping those hours in and submitting those hours to the apprenticeship, because the apprenticeship doesn't know how many hours you're actually getting. If you're pencil whipping, hey, I'm getting 5 hours a day, they think you're getting hot work. So that doesn't matter whether that hot work is actually working on energized power lines, like doing a double dead end, or doing a hot pull change out, or if you're just energizing 5 underground transformers. So you're doing it to yourself. Just make a mental note that, hey, am I kind of screwing myself right now? Instead of writing down 5 hours of hot time, do I write down 1 or 2 hours? Yes, it's going to take you a little bit longer to get that hot time, but at the end of the day too, it's kind of only going to help yourself, because once you actually get on a job where you are getting the real hot time you're looking for, then that makes you more of a qualified or a better journeyman when you come out of the apprenticeship and you get to a job where you're actually doing hot work and you don't look like a complete idiot because you didn't pencil whip all your hot time in. So that's kind of what it all means for the hot time, getting energized hours inside of the apprenticeship. You got to get hours in these certain categories. This is for every apprenticeship. Construction, carpenter's apprenticeship, if there's a pipe fitters, if there's boiler makers, electrician, iron workers, any one of these apprenticeships you can think of, especially union, you're going to be needing to get hours in certain categories within that trade so you can have the best overall learning experience, educational experience. By the time you get done with that apprenticeship, you have the best knowledge that you can have within 3.5, 4, 5, 6 years, however long that apprenticeship takes. That's the whole purpose of the apprenticeship, to come out as a qualified journeyman, whatever, lineman, electrician, plumber, HVAC tech, sprinkler fitter, pipe fitter, iron worker, boiler maker. It doesn't matter. You want to be the best qualified, but really the real learning starts once you become a journeyman and you start doing your own thing wherever you want to go. Pencil whipping hot hours, pencil whipping hours in general, just be careful doing that, because I know the time you want to become a journeyman, the more hours you pencil whip, the faster you get done with the apprenticeship, the better, because now you're a journeyman and everyone wants to become the journeyman. But trust me, the process, it takes time. You're only doing it to yourself if you're pencil whipping hours in that you didn't truly deserve. Like I said, I did it for myself in the apprenticeship substation. I never got put working in a substation anywhere. I had to pencil whip hours in because every time I drove by a substation or we worked near a substation, my journeyman, my foreman said, hey, you just got substation hours. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, well, you just drove by a substation. That's 2 hours of substation time. And I'm like, all right, cool. At the time, I'm like, I'm a 5th, 6th step apprentice. I'm almost done. I got like 6 months to a year left. I'm not going to be put in a substation. I'm already getting actual good hot time. So, and the journeyman and the foreman is telling me, hey, you got substation time. We were working next to a substation. And I was like, okay, cool. So I pencil whipped it in and they signed off on it. So it's kind of both our faults, but at the end of the day, I have worked in and near a substation now that I've been a journeyman. And, if you can pick these things up, if you can learn, then it's not that big of a deal. But hot time, very specific. You're only kind of screwing yourself. All right, let's get into question number 2. Question number 2 comes from a guy named Claudio who emailed me saying, hey man, I've got a question for you. What are the main differences between working for a union compared to a contractor in regards to lineman work? Thank you. So the main differences, there isn't really differences between union and contractor. There are differences, but let me kind of break this down for you a little bit. When it comes to working for a union or for the contractor, you have union contractors, IBW union contractors. I could name off a few of them. Sturgeon or MYR Group, they have a bunch of union contractors. Patelco, or you have Par Electric, or you have Michaels, or you have, there's actual probably hundreds of union contractors out there, and they do work as a contractor for utility under the union. So if they're a union contractor, they're working, let's just say for instance here in Arizona under IBW Local 769, which is the local here, you have like 5, 6, or 7 contractors working, MPL, Sturgeon, Power. These contractors, they work under the union, but they work on APS or SRP property. APS, SRP being the utilities. So they are union contractors, and as a union journeyman lineman, I go to the union hall, I sign my name on the out of work books list, and as work comes in, calls come in, they get to my name, they call me, hey Austin, we have a position for you, or we have a position available for XYZ contractor where they're working 510s and blah, 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 blah. Do you accept or decline? Either I accept or I decline. If I accept, they say, okay, cool, we're gonna send you some paperwork. They send me paperwork. I get a hold of the GF or supervisor with that company. He tells me, hey, come here at this date, this time. You're gonna do onboarding, take a drug test, do blah, 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 do all the onboarding stuff. So you have a union contractors. Now you also have non-union contractors, which non-union contractors are all over the country. Now, specifically more so the South and Midwest. So Texas over to Florida, up to like North Carolina, Missouri, Indiana. A lot of the states in that area, the Dakotas, there's non-union contractors everywhere. Now you get to places like on the East Coast, the West Coast, where unions are a lot stronger. They're more democratic cities or states. That's where you have, they're not right to work states. Like Arizona is a right to work state, but because APS and SRP, their linemen there are union linemen, they hire for the most part union contractors to do work on their property. So that gives us union members work in the state of Arizona. There are non-union contractors in the area around, like there is in California, Washington, Oregon. They are not right to work states. So those are all union contractors. Now, like I said, you start moving east, Utah, Montana, the Dakotas, Oklahoma, a lot of these other states are right to work states where non-union contractors can work. So that's the main difference between like a union and a contractor. There isn't really so much the difference between a union and a contractor. The difference is you have union contractors and you have non-union contractors. To be honest, non-union contractors dominate the power line industry for the most part. I think this percentage I heard a while back was like 10, 15% of power line work, construction work done in the United States is done by union contractors. The rest, which is like 90 to 85 to 90%, is done by non-union contractors. So that's a pretty big gap. And of course, the union's always trying to get more members, trying to get more work to make that number not 10%, but probably more 20, 30 to 40%, right? The more work, the more members, the more money. It's a whole thing. So that's the difference, not between union and contractor. It's union contractors versus non-union contractors. You'll have union utilities versus non-union utilities. And those are the differences so much where you have union work and you have non-union work. And if you want to get into the lineman industry, that's kind of where you can start looking. I preach, I teach, I educate about getting into a union IBW apprenticeship, like I was saying earlier in the video, because the union apprenticeship is worth so much. You get so much learning. There are non-union apprenticeships out there, don't get me wrong. And I've never been through one. I don't know one who's ever been through a non-union apprenticeship, but I know from my experience that everyone else that has come from non-union, who has gone through a union apprenticeship, it's great training, it's great education, it's paid to learn on the job. It's the way to go, in my opinion, when it comes to getting the appropriate experience and appropriate education to become a journeyman of your trade. Union is the way to go. Obviously, the money, the benefits, and things like that as well. You can learn more about that by going to ibw.org, and you can search and learn a whole lot more about what the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers has to offer for you, either as an electrician, a substation worker, or as a lineman. Hopefully, you guys can learn from this video kind of what it means to get certain hours in the apprenticeship and pencil whipping, how that can affect you as an apprentice. Take that as you will from me. That's just my experience and what I would tell you as an apprentice. The difference between contractor and union, well, really union contractor versus non-union contractors is more of the question I think he was maybe wondering about. So hopefully you guys can learn from those questions and my answers. With Blue Collar EDU, I'm here to expose, teach, educate you about blue collar career opportunities and things that'll help you get started in a skilled trade. And with that being said, I'll catch you on episode 14 of CTQ.